You are listening to Revealing Real Estate Podcast, where we dive into getting over your fear of taking risk in real estate and making money while you sleep. I'm Nico Pedizano, your host and real estate guru with over 20 years of experience. It's time to get real. All right. We got a wonderful show today. Welcome back to Revealing Real Estate. We are going to have our wonderful co-host, Jessica Ruffolo, on the show today. All right. Everybody clap your hands for Jessica Ruffolo. How you doing, Jess?
I'm great. How are you, Nick?
Good. Thanks. With high demand, we have you back on the show. Our fans have been asking, hey, we got to bring Jessica Ruffolo back on the show. So we got you back on the show.
I'm honored.
Awesome. Thank you. And we are honored to have you on the show. And we are excited. And we got a wonderful topic to talk about today. And I'm going to have you side by side as my co-host. One, the truth of the matter is I find it easier when somebody's there asking me questions.
Of course.
So we'll get in depth on that because, me sitting there just talking by myself to a camera sometimes feels a little uncomfortable for me. But maybe it's something I got to learn to become more comfortable with, because when you're uncomfortable is when you become the most successful.
Mm-hmm. That is true. You grow the most.
So
yes.
Maybe that's one of those other fears that I gotta overcome. But right now, I'm just lucky to have you on board. So why don't we dive right in? Today, we're going to just be talking a lot about how, what created my success within the business. We're going to be sharing a lot of in-depth of what I think young, inspiring agents will need to do when starting within the business. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about what really motivates buyers, what motivates sellers, and understanding the psychological mindset towards buyers and sellers and why it's important to understand that so you can better position your marketing campaigns, your strategies, and the way you were able to influence somebody from making one of the biggest decisions that they'll ever make in their entire life. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure you have a few questions for me.
I do.
Awesome.
Yes. I definitely want to start off with understanding why someone should work with the OP team specifically. Exactly what you drill into your real estate agents in order for clients to be like, out of all the real estate agents in the GTA or in Vaughan, why should we be working with the OP team, right? So I think it's important to understand the motivation behind buyers and sellers, like you said. And I'd love for you to just touch on that, try to understand the motivations behind them, understanding your client.
A lot of things, when we separate the two, we'll start with buyer and what motivates a buyer. There's really four main essential things that a buyer really wants to, that you would need to understand about your buyer. Number one is, what can they afford, right? Affordability is a very huge understanding their budget and moving them into a product. I see so many agents make so many mistakes that they start working with clients that they haven't pre-approved yet. And a lot of times when I speak to our realtors, including myself, if I'm going to take a buyer route to go and see houses, I want to make sure that, hey, this is what they can afford. And then we're going to select from there what they're able to afford, what areas they can buy within that market. And that's one of the main things I start off with when dealing with a buyer. What motivates a buyer is budget and affordability. Then we'll look at the location and what locations would they prefer based on within their budget. And then we'll look at, okay, well, once we see a product that's that's within their budget, within their location, we'll look at what's the investment potential. Where are they going to get the best return for their dollar? And is there a good rental market there, right? Is it close to GO Train? Are you close to a good walking GO station? What's the rating on the walking score? What's the community like when it comes to community centers and grocery stores and gas stations? Yeah. What's the rating, all that? So we want to look at all that as an investment opportunity. Is there a hospital that's built nearby? That'll be really good. Is there a highway close? Right. So those are the things that are going to be very influential towards somebody making a decision based on what their lifestyle choices are. And that's the fourth one. People have different lifestyles, right? And we're all separately have different choices that we want to make. Yes. I sometimes prefer not to take a transit. I would prefer to drive. So transit to me is not going to be important. Mm-hmm. But to some, they want to take transit. That commute, that saving, that time frame that they're going to be able to drive down from Vaughan to the city,
Right.
that time frame that they spend in a car could be well spent on the subway line, where they're able to respond to emails and start their day off where it doesn't prolong them for the end of the day. The commute for gas, wear and tear on vehicles, is very important. I tell people all the time, when you're making decisions based on affordability and within your budget, does it make sense to really drive an hour north because you're going to save on the value of the home? Or does it still make sense to really get a smaller product within your budget? Maybe that's a little bit more local, because you got to put time into factor. You got to put wear and tear into your calculation on your vehicle, brakes, and and all that stuff. So many different things. You have to make sure that you understand the gas pricing today. How much more is it going to cost you on gas pricing?
Yeah.
So was it better that maybe you influence that budget, or we increase that budget if we can get you pre-approved to buy something that was $100,000 more or $100,000 less, but up north, and make that decision much faster? Yeah. So a lot of times we like to sit down with our clients and first and foremost talk about those main 4 factors. Once you've nailed down those 4 main factors, then it becomes a much easier process to get your buyers onto home ownership, whether it's their first time home or it's a reoccurring property that they're willing to purchase.
For sure. And I love that. I think it's so important to really understand your clients, especially as a real estate agent.
Yeah.
And I think that trust is also a big factor as well, getting your clients to trust you. And I think that that's something that people can see through your online presence, right? You have a personal brand that you've built for yourself and then for your team, and it's very evident on your social media platforms. So I want to know why it's so important to build that trust, even just on your social media for your clients.
The best way I can answer that's a very good question, is if I'm going to do business with somebody, sometimes I want to put myself in a perspective of and I deal with people that I'm their client. And most of the time, the reason I do business with somebody is 2 main factors. Is 1, I trust the person that's going to represent me. And 2, I actually like the person I'm going to be dealing with. Right? Because how many people are going to do business with somebody that they don't like? And for me, it was always about making sure that I come across to become that trusted confidant, where they're going to be able to confide in me. Everything stays confidential and private. But the second thing is that we can have a relationship, because at the end of the day, I don't want to work with somebody that I don't like or want to deal with. And I'm sure that they're not going to want to work with me if we don't really get along and have any relationship whatsoever on it. Right. So that's now, and then when I to answer the question, when I go back into the social media aspect, that's my real focal point, is how can somebody relate to me? And, one of the reasons why we started this podcast and why I try to provide, this type of education is so that people can understand that, hey, I am a relatable guy. I am approachable. If you do hire me, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to give you the best service possible. 1, because I'm in the service business. But 2, I'm going to put you in a position that is what's going to be best for you as my client, right? And that's what's really the most important for me.
For sure.
Right? And we can relate that even to sellers, right? And when you go into a listing presentation and you've been called on to list somebody's house, it's a big responsibility, and I think it's important for people to understand that. Now, first and foremost, understand what your client, what's motivating your seller, right? And listening is very important, right? Because if we listen to what motivates our sellers, I think it becomes a much easier conversation when you know exactly what you're dealing with first and foremost, right? So one of the first questions I'll ask when I'm sitting in front of the table is, what is it? Why is it that you want to get this home sold? And it may be so many different factors. Yeah. We're going through a divorce, or we've bought a house already. We want to upsize. We want to downsize. My kids have all moved out. They've gone to different schools. I want to move closer to my kids. My kids have, so there's so many different factors. So that should be question number 1. Yeah. Right? Understand what really is motivating your seller. Right. So, and then most of the time, what's going to drive a seller, right, to want to work with you? They need to know that you're there maximizing their sale price on their property.
For sure.
Nobody wants to leave any money on the table. Very rarely do people choose to take a less amount of money on the table versus something that's more to the table.
Mm-mm.
It has happened. That's a whole topic on its own. It's not something that I promote,
Mhm.
but it does happen. So maximizing profits for sellers is a very big component towards understanding what the client's needs are. Uh, Also, clients don't want to stay on the market for a very long time.
Right.
They want a quick sale.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't want to be on the market for 30, 60 days. I don't want them on the market for 36 days.
Mm-hmm.
People have to understand the psychology between the cycle of buyers. And as soon as a property gets listed on the market, you want to get that property sold most likely within the first 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, a week, 7 days. Shouldn't take that much longer, especially within this market. Average days on market should be 15 days. If you know you've gone above that 15-day time frame, that property is most likely going to be overpriced anyway,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to need an adjustment in price. And the worst thing a seller can do is try to list it too high and overinflate the values of their properties, and then it sit on the market and leave that room to negotiate. I don't prefer to list my homes that way. My strategy is let's list it as close as possible,
Mm-hmm.
even undervalued slightly, but let's list it close to that value, what that house is worth, and we don't leave any wiggle room to negotiate. Very little. This is our price. This is what we're coming to market. This is what we're asking. Let's work within there.
That's it. Yeah.
And one of the biggest reasons that somebody who's trying to sell their house privately doesn't sell is because they don't know how to price correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And pricing is everything. It's a huge strategy for sure.
For sure, absolutely. And it's great that you share this type of education on your podcast and on your platforms. And that to me says you could trust me because I know what I'm talking about. And
Yes.
yes, especially on social media, you get DMs all the time from people and emails all the time and touching back on making sure that your client is happy. How do you utilize customer service and making sure that that customer experience is good on your team? And how does that, help a real estate agent and a client together when you're touching on the customer service aspect?
Yeah, customer service is huge. And I think it's just being involved with that client every single day, right? Because, number one, we want to anytime we have one of our listings for sure. It's we don't take a listing, just put it on the market, and then never hear from us again,
Mm-hmm.
right? If there was an agent that showed that property, clients want to know whether it's good or bad criticism on their home. Whether it's priced too high, or they felt that the house and the layout didn't work for them, or hey, they didn't like it because it backed onto hydro lines or a railroad track. My client, didn't like the finishings in the home or the way it was all put together. It's important to kind of make sure that your clients are aware of that, and paying attention to those needs are very important, because if you haven't gone through the selling process of selling a home, it's a very stressful process.
Mm-hmm.
And my agents are very good at this too as well, including myself. Is a lot of times we got to understand that this is what we do as professionals. This is who we are. Your job is to make sure that you remove all that stress into that client wanting to sell their home and put it on our shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And I've built a wonderful team around me that have helped me to take on a lot of that stress. So we have very moving components. We have a wonderful girl within our office, Citra, that we all know, who runs our client care service department.
Mm-hmm.
We have a marketing team. We have our team concierge service that really makes sure that everything moves well regarding scheduling.
Mm-hmm.
We have our stagers, our photographers. Everybody collectively works together so that we can give our clients the best experience and the best service possible. And that's what it's about.
Right.
At the end, yes, you're going to hire me because of my negotiation skills, right? And you want somebody who's experienced and knowing how to negotiate. But we're also here to service the client. And if you can provide that added, lasting, precious touch point that's going to make somebody feel warm and fuzzy at the end of the day, that's what the transaction is about first and foremost. Drive with the passion, right? So make somebody feel good about why they chose you as their real estate agent and truly care for them. And if you can do that, at the end of the day, I think it's a win-win for both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely.
But I just want to go back on as well what motivates sellers too
Yeah,
as well. We got to
sure.
understand, a lot of the time, knowing how to find the right buyer for their home is very essential, because
Yes.
there's a lot of pride that comes into selling a house. Or when what I, from my experience, sellers become very concerned about who's going to be buying their home.
Hmm.
And they want the right family because they've put a lot of pride and a lot of passion into the home. And they want to make sure that somebody's going, when they move in and take over that house, they're going to treat that house with the exact same pride and passion as well that they put in, and the care that they put into that home.
Hmm.
It becomes, and believe me or not, I get asked this question all the time. Are we able to know who the buyer is who's buying the house? And I said, of course you do. And I'll try to
Wow.
find out all relevant information
Hmm.
on that buyer who's buying it, because it is your right to know. And specifically, we'll ask the right questions for the agent. So that's part of our servicing, that we'll make sure that we try to find the right buyer who's going to match for our sellers. And as real estate agents, that's what we get paid to do.
Hmm.
As believe it or not, we are in the relationship building business.
Enjoying this episode? Subscribe to our channel and leave us a comment down below to let us know what you want to learn next. Make sure you're following our Instagram and TikTok to stay up to date on our new episodes every Friday.
So we will find people to, and it happens all the time. Sometimes I'll have an exclusive piece of land or a property that comes up for sale. And my job is to find somebody who's going to be the right buyer for that land. And sometimes these lands are selling for $50 million, $60 million. Not everybody has $50, $60 million. My job is to get out there and knock on doors to find that right buyer who's going to buy that property. Right? Finding a home where you have an estate property that's worth $9, $10 million. Not many people have $9, $10 million equitable, in cash, or able to afford to purchase a house like that. How do we find that little niche market that's able to afford that? And there are so many different factors in our marketing campaigns that allow us to do it. And of course, through our database that we built up over the years, that will allow us to attract that. But and fourthly, you know, it's the circumstances of the seller, right? Finding out what their specific needs are, and knowing those specific needs become very, very important. And when you can tap into what that need is, it's easier to guide the selling process, and run control of the entire listing so that they can have a wonderful experience through it all.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that's great how you touched upon, finding the right buyers, let's say, for your sellers. And that kind of leads into my next question, all about networking and relationship building. Naturally, as a client, you want your real estate agent who is good at networking and knows a lot of people, so that they can find that good buyer for you, or you can, again, trust them that they know exactly what they're doing. So how do you, build your network and your relationship so that you do find that good buyer for your sellers, let's say, or just in general?
A lot of times when I started out, the way I started out was I really started with a very niche market, and we called it, and most people that are in our industry, we call it geo farming, or geographical farming for that instance. And when I started within the business, geographical farming was very important to me. And it doesn't have to start, you don't have to start with 10,000 homes. You don't have to start with 20,000 homes. You start small. And as a young real estate agent who's inspiring and to grow within and make it a business, it's finding the people that you don't know. Yeah, you got the people that you know, right? So you can attend all these networking events. You can go online and find different ways to optimize Google AdWords, which are very difficult, and it's a process, and I can do an entire podcast just on that alone. You can go to community events. You can join many different groups and stuff like that, for sure. So there's a lot of ways that people or agents can go out there and find different ways to maximize on that. But I found that the biggest and the most effective way for me to do that was to make sure that I specialize in a certain pocket or in a certain area. And I started with 1,000 homes. And in that 1,000 homes, I knew every single house, and I knew every single property that's sold in that specific pocket.
Wow.
And if a came listed on the market, I went to do a agent inspection on that property, and I went to go see what that house was like so I can best describe that property. And then I would go around and door knock the area, and not, and we call it soft sell in our business, and really not ask them if they want to buy or sell a house. I just went in there and say, hey, how you doing? It's Nico Petizano, and knock on the door. Nice to meet you. If you ever need if you have any real estate needs, please, here's my business card. Give me a call. Be glad to help. Face-to-face interaction. It's touch points. Right. Next week, hey, a property sells on their street. Go back. Hey, how you doing? It's Nick again. Don't want to bother you. Just want to let you know a property just sold on your street. Want to give you some information on it. Would you want to hear about it? Yes, I would. Oh, no, I already know about it. Whatever the situation may be. If I got a listing in the area, I made sure that when I went out door knocking and I did an open house on Saturday and Sunday, I invited the community to the open house. I invited those people that live on the street to come by and take a look. And, you know, some sellers may say, well, open houses don't work. And I just don't want nosy neighbors to come into the house. But these nosy neighbors actually have friends. They have family members. They have colleagues that may want to move into that community or may want to move into that street. Did we maximize to make sure that we found the right buyer for that seller? That is part of our job. So a lot of times still today, when we take on our listings, our agents are going to go out there. And if they got running an open house, they're going to go out there and do some door knocking campaigns to invite the neighbor, to invite the community to come and see this open house. Right. And of course, we'll have some nice spreads, some water, you know, all that stuff, right? Yeah, some nice goodies.
Might drop by.
Got to make sure that buyer feels warm and fuzzy. You know, light up some nice candles, you know, that are scented. You know, nothing better than, you know, a nice, beautiful smell inside a home that makes you feel warm and fuzzy and says, hey, this house is very inviting.
Yes.
So geo farming is really big. And then if you can start learning to expand your geo farming, that's how you're really going to build a good database and network of buyers, right? So when we've built up over the years, every single open house that we did, and they weren't working with a real estate agent, they wanted to be part of and they checked on that box that they wanted to be part to receive our emails and to receive our listings on the market. We built up a following base of buyers that are looking to either invest, live in the community, or have friends and family that want to move into the community. Right. And that was a very big part of my growth at the beginning. You know, and then, you know, that's how it starts, right? And that's where you actually build. It's the reverse. People say, oh, you invest all this money and then, you know, to attract all, you know, marketing is a huge component to build your name and to build your brand. And then you built a foundation. The foundation starts from when you start the door knocking. The foundation starts when you start to hustle and make those calls to that client. The foundation starts when you're working that specific community and running your hustle. That's your foundation, right? Everything else becomes the growth of you building that foundation, if that makes sense.
Right. And that actually leads perfectly into my next question is that,
man, you got a lot of questions for me.
I have lots of questions, yes, always.
But I think this is great wonderful show for people that are inspiring to be realtors or people that want to sell their house, that understand don't understand what's involved into getting their home sold, or for buyers knowing how to start getting into the market and start searching. And ideally, you never want to do either buy or sell without using a real professional. And I really advocate on making sure that you have interview agents. Feel comfortable making sure that agent is knowledgeable and understands it. Am I going to be the right real estate agent or team to list your house in Mississauga? Probably not. Am I going to be that guy who's going to probably be the one who's going to be able to list your house in Scarborough and Markham? Probably not, right? Now my team is growing and we are in different markets for sure, and we're building brands in those sectors. But at the beginning stages, when I was early on, I would eat, sleep, breathe Vaughan. I rarely crossed deals. I just worked. I didn't have time, and I didn't get into the city. I'm not a city guy. I prefer the suburbs. I prefer that location, but this is where I grew up. This is what I understand. So I know all the community events, right? I know what infrastructures are getting built. I know the demographics, right? I know the age groups. I know the employments. I study it. And as a realtor that wants to get within this market, you got to know the market that you're in and who is your market, right? And what it's about, and study that. And that's what's going to make you unique. What's going to what makes me unique as a real estate agent is that I really have good product knowledge.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And it shows for sure. And I think that, you know, when you started, you stated that you build that foundation doing geofarming and understanding that specific community so that you were educated on that specific community. Do you think if you had the type of marketing that we do now, would that have advanced your foundation and understanding the community faster, or do you think it would have made it harder in a sense?
If I had to go back, I would have to start the same way because I didn't have the money or the capital to start doing it. And by the time it actually pays off, the consistency in spending that money would probably take me about 3 years to really build a good, solid foundation or and a brand and a specialist in a certain community or a certain area. And that's you're dumping in a lot of money. Like I've dumped in millions to get to where I am today. And it's essential to understand that it is at a very big cost. Agents today need to social media is not going to be enough. Right? Just going in there and having an Instagram page is not going to be enough for you. And there's a lot more moving parts involved in it. And that's why teams started to escalate and become the new movement when a while back. And I think they've been running really strong for 10 to 15 years now. And I was very early on in setting up the team is because when I started to initially start getting recognized as a household brand within a certain community, that the team concept became more essential to agents to want to get involved in because it made things more easier for them to get into those doors and understand that, hey, I have the OP team behind me as my brand where it becomes recognized. How many times people say it and see it all the time? Oh, I see your signs everywhere. Oh, I seen you sold this house there. Oh, I see your billboard. Or I see your for sale sign. Or I see your bunch stop ad. Oh, I get your flyer in the mail. Oh, I see you on social media. So marketing becomes that puzzle, right? But it doesn't just happen overnight. It becomes an investment, and you have to put that investment in there. There's no way that I would be able to build that without starting the hustle
The way
and
that you did.
starting the way I did,
Yeah.
right? So that's what I needed to do was to build and start that foundation. And door knocking today, that back then when I was doing it, was a big process of it. And it was just about providing free educational information to the consumer, and that's what kind of really drove me.
For sure.
Agents can take the networking and building, the referral based business is always what people are going to tell you. I think AI is going to be taking over ways of how we can contribute towards real estate.
It is.
I
Yes.
think I think that's going to be a real game changer. It provides instant information and whether you want to start a podcast and stuff like that. But you got to have a social media presence. You got to be out there. Yeah, marketing, like I said, is a puzzle. You're going to take it from different pieces. You're going to grow your brand that way, and it helps us build now a following base or a database at a very large scale, so that when we have a listing that comes on the market, that's why our houses will sell above average versus our competition. And when I go into a listing presentation, agents or an agent, you got to have some stats behind you, right? Find out why you're the number one agent in that industry. Find out in that sector. Have the stats. Talk about how many homes you sell. What's your list price to ask price ratio? What's your days on market as a real estate agent? Are you and why somebody should choose you versus your competition? Value. But when you start out, or young agents that are even starting out within the business, get out there and try to. My thing is, you list, you last, for sure. It's a saying that I've heard for 20 years and still exists to me in my mind today, and it is the truth. If you're a listing agent, there's so much the more that could come reciprocate through having that listing that will allow you to gain further growth, and build from there. But it ain't cheap, it ain't expensive, and it is hard work. So despite what you see on these television shows and what you see out there within the market today, hustle is the key component right now to start. People don't understand the amount of calls I used to make every day, and it was hard. And the hardest thing to do is the rejection or facing the rejection. But I had thick skin, and I had to tell myself what was my reason. Find a reason why you should go out there and prospect, get in touch with more people. And this is something that I really want to say quite often. We are in this business to build relationships. And the more conversations we have, the more relationships we'll build. If we have more relationships, we will sign more contracts. And when we sign more contracts, it will mean more commissions. That's just kind of what the process is. How do you now talk to more people? How do you start now building on more relationships? And it's a hard transition, but you got to be out there networking, and there's a whole bunch of that I can go on for days about. But yeah, no, this has been a wonderful podcast. This has been great. I hope we provided some wonderful education to all our viewers. And it's been wonderful having you, Jess, as my co-host, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Looking to buy or sell? Call a team you can trust. Don't believe me? Our Google reviews say it all. Put us on your lawn, your house will be gone. TheOPteam.com.